This is the Weekly You Demon. I encourage you to listen. It's good stuff. Sometimes he's even sober during the show.
We slam it to the holidays. Unfortunately, I had to prepare this podcast all in one day. If you listen to the podcast regularly, you probably realize I prepare it throughout the week. I do 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and then I put it together on Saturday or Sunday. Because of my travel schedule these past 2 weeks, I've had to cram it all into one day. So today's going to be a hodgepodge of some early recordings, along with some current stuff. I think it came out pretty good, though. We're going to talk about the Russian retreats. We're going to talk about Fools for Christ, Black Friday. We're going to revisit the Marijuana Convention and Thaddeus Russell's Renegade History of the United States. I think the show is pretty good. I think you're going to enjoy it. Okay, I hope everyone survived the excesses of Black Wednesday, followed by Black Friday. Longtime readers of the Daily Demon know I'm a big fan of Black Wednesday, not much of a fan of Black Friday. I've always found the excess shopping and gotta get to the mall type mentality of Black Friday kind of disturbing. And to be honest with myself, I've always been kind of snobbish about it. Like, I'm above that type of animal mentality. That's my own spiritual problem I have to work out, I suppose. But let's face it. I mean, you watch those Black Friday videos of people getting in fist fights, and even not getting fist fights, just standing in line for hours to get a good deal on some consumeristic product. It's hard not to hold those people in a certain level of disdain. And if you got on the Daily Demon blog last week, you would have seen on Friday I had a prolonged cogitation on this phenomenon, and I hearkened back to an essay by Ralph Adams Cram. Ralph Adams Cram was a devout Episcopalian architect, designed a lot of churches. He's actually venerated in the Episcopalian Church. He wrote an essay in 1932 called Why We Do Not Behave Like Human Beings. And his basic point was, when we say human beings, we're referring to or expecting of that person the life of a Plato or a St. Francis of Assisi or a St. Teresa Avila. And he goes, we're simply expecting too much. The vast majority of mankind are much lower than those exalted human beings. And then one of my favorite thinkers, the godfather of modern libertarianism, Albert J. Nock, took that point and seemed to take it to another level, where basically he said, yeah, you're absolutely right. Ralph Adams Cram is right. You have the great men, and then you have the massive men. And those massive men are closer to the gorillas than they are to the great men. Even though I like Albert J. Nock, I like him a lot. And in fact, for a while, I jumped into all his works. I think I bought all the books he ever wrote, most of his articles. And I was going to write a book about Albert J. Nock, but there are a couple of his fundamental thoughts that I couldn't reconcile with the Catholic faith, and this was one of them. He basically seems to posit the idea that men are born with two different souls. You got, like, gorilla-souled men, and then you have the great men. And again, he never said that. He never said... Nock himself was an Episcopalian. He was an Episcopalian minister for a few years. And I don't know where his Christian faith was later in his life, but I don't think he was so heterodox he would have actually posited that men have two different souls. But that is basically what he said. In fact, at one point he said... He goes, I saw a bum on the street, and I thought to myself, I started to be disgusted by him, and I told myself, hey, he can't help it any more than Doc can help digging in the trash. Yeah, he's pretty bold, and in his journals, he's pretty bold, and basically said that massive men have more animal-type souls than they do noble souls of Plato. I've always found it troubling that the libertarian movement in general just seems to have this type of this smug superiority, kind of like the smarminess that I saw at the Marijuana Convention. This sense of superiority, and libertarians seem to have it. Albert J. Nock himself, before he died, he said basically we need to come up with a remnant, a core of us who see things as they really are, a core of us who no doubt are the great men. That's one thing with the libertarians, or anyone who puts people in two different categories. They always just presuppose that they're one of the good ones, or here one of the great men. But here, Knox said this remnant, us who understand these libertarian type ideas, we're the great men, and we need to carry on the thoughts of future generations and hope that maybe someday we'll prevail. And it's a troubling thought process among libertarians. But then again, you look at the excesses of Black Friday, and you kind of sympathize with them. BC Roadkill, Buddy Effer, Cat Piss, Purple Monkey Balls. Those are popular names of marijuana strains right now. And one of the presenters at the business convention, Tusco in Las Vegas, basically said, these are the way we brand marijuana now, and this stuff has got to stop. He said, let's be honest with ourselves, this is currently an industry by stoners, for stoners. And if we want to take marijuana to the $2 trillion potential it has by the year 2050, we have to stop acting like stoners. We got to take it to the mainstream, take it to the middle class. And these type of brandings, the Purple Monkey Balls, he goes, that stops now. He goes, if you want to be serious about this, basically if you want to make this a legitimate business, stop acting like stoners, start acting like adults. He was a little more nicer about it than that, but that was clearly what he was saying. He's like, enough already, which I kind of applauded. What I found fascinating about that, though, is I'm a big fan of The Renegade History of the United States by Thaddeus Russell. I also like his podcast, Unregistered. Thaddeus Russell and I don't have a lot in common. He was raised by communist parents. He won't identify as a libertarian, although he clearly has libertarian leanings. He's a postmodernist in almost absurd lengths. He doesn't understand the Catholic Church, and he doesn't understand natural law. But I find him engaging, and I really like him. I like his thought process. But anyway, in The Renegade History of the United States, his basic gist seemed to be these outcast groups didn't fit in with the American mainstream, so they came up with their own cultures, their own practices. They took things that were taboo and did them within their own little circles. But then their cultural practices and their circle among this outcast group, they then became mainstream. And so he just gave lots of examples, like the Stonewall gay riots in 1969, he said, were a celebration of gay excess. I don't have the book in front of me as I'm doing this, but he talked about how in terms of when the cops came and busted Stonewall and that riot broke out, there was like a line of drag queen cabaret guys doing kick dancing, getting to celebrating the gay excess. And he said that was really a marked turnaround from the prior gay liberation movement from the 50s and early 60s that sought to mainstream homosexuality, and it was just kind of didn't go anywhere. And he basically, Thaddeus Russell excoriates the current, I shouldn't say excoriates, that's a little strong, basically mildly condemns the current gay rights movement and the gay marriage, saying all you're trying to do is mainstream it. He says you should celebrate your own excesses, your own uniqueness, and not mainstream it. In Thaddeus Russell's history, every time one of these outcast groups' practices or beliefs becomes mainstream, that's a victory for them, and also often increases American freedom. And for Thaddeus Russell, freedom is just license. He doesn't have a higher notion of freedom. But he said when these outcast groups, when their practices become mainstream, it's a victory for them, but it's also a defeat, because now it's mainstreamed, and American culture basically stultifies it and makes it fit within its norms. One of his favorite whipping boys in this regard is everything gets shoved into the Puritan work ethic. And that's exactly what's happening with the marijuana industry. I have little doubt that Thaddeus Russell would applaud the blacks who have kept the marijuana trade, the use of marijuana alive for the past, 100 years. The Cheech and Chong type culture. No doubt Thaddeus Russell would say, right on, they celebrated it, and now that it's actually becoming legal. And this is exactly what he talks about in the Renegade History of the United States. But then you go to the Marijuana Business Convention, And a speaker point blank says, we have to stop celebrating its excess, its uniqueness, and we need to basically pinch and push this stuff into the Puritan work ethic, that this is a legitimate business and we all work really, really hard and we're just as legitimate businesses as any other business. And I'd just love to see what Thaddeus Russell would say if he saw this. I think he'd cringe. He'd say, good for you to get this pushed, into the American mainstream. But geez, so Pete's, now you're taking everything that made you fun and different, and now you're just going to mainstream it. You're going to put it in this Puritan work ethic where everyone works really hard to try to make the almighty American dollar. I think you'd cringe at it. And it's happening right now. If you go to these conferences, you'll see this metamorphosis going on. It's pretty fascinating. Let's jump into the lighting segments. Every year when I head to Detroit on Thanksgiving night, I take my kids down 8 Mile. We jump on 8 Mile on the west side of Detroit suburbs, and we get off on the east side, so we go the entire length of 8 Mile. I'm guessing it's about, 10 miles. And it's a pretty seedy neighborhood. I'm sorry, for those who aren't aware, 8 Mile is the famous or notorious dividing line between Detroit and the northern suburbs. So you head down 8 Mile going east. On the right side you have Detroit, on the left side you have the suburbs. There's a pretty big difference between the two sides. Not as much as it used to be. The right side of 8 Mile, Detroit's gotten a little bit nicer, and the left side's gotten a little bit worse, so they've kind of come closer together. But we're always fascinated by the decadence along 8 Mile. This year we counted 17 pot dispensaries, 11 gentlemen's clubs, strip joints, some adult bookstores, and numerous liquor stores. Las Vegas for the poor class. My kids told me about a funny website called WorldStar. I guess it's a site dedicated to fights in the urban jungles, basically. Mostly the hip-hop culture, various fights breaking out, just some pretty outrageous stuff. Be careful, it's definitely R or X rated at points. But I guess it's gotten so popular, this WorldStar site, that when fights break out at a White Castle or some other urban venue, you hear people yell in the background, WorldStar. I haven't checked it out yet, but I gotta believe there's quite a bit of footage from Black Friday. Podcast recommendation for the week, Our Fake History. This guy does a real nice job. At times it's a little bit too verbose, but for the most part, he does a fascinating job with some interesting areas of history. I highly recommend it. Due to this hectic travel schedule, as I mentioned in the introduction, I haven't had a chance to podcast as frequently as I'd like to. Therefore, I don't have a Tao segment. But I will mention this. If you want what I think is the perfect Tao outlook, have 2 drinks. To me, 1, probably 2, maybe 3 drinks gives that perfect Taoist type outlook. And I'd encourage you to maybe embrace that outlook frequently throughout the holiday celebration. It'll make you much more grateful and playful. If you're curious, in that Ralph Adams Cram essay, Why We Do Not Behave Like Human Beings, here's a list of the people he listed as the great men in history, men and women. And he said this is just a very small, partial list. Anyway, here it is. Pharaoh Akhenaten, King David, Pericles, Plato, Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Virgil, Abdur-Rahman of Cordoba, Charlemagne, Roland, Saint Benedict, Saint Francis, Saint Louis, Godfrey de Bouillon, Saladin, Richard the Lionhearted, Dante, Leonardo, St. Thomas Aquinas, Joan of Arc, St. Teresa Avila, Frederick II, Otto the Great, St. Ferdinand of Spain, Chaucer, Shakespeare, the Earl of Stratford, Montrose, Mary of Scotland, Washington, John Adams, Robert E. Lee. I would take issue with a few of those names on the list, but for the most part, it's a pretty good list. The Russian Christian is a pretty scary thing. The Russians, as a general rule, were late to the game, to the Christianity game, converting relatively late compared to the rest of the European peoples. And you combine that with the fact that they're not really European peoples. I mean, they're considered part of Europe, but the bulk of their landmass is in Asia, and they're right there on the border, and they're kind of a mix of different types of people. They're very, I hesitate to put it this way, but they're very arrogant. They have a sense of manifest destiny. From their standpoint, Moscow is the third Rome. So you had Rome, which was the original seat of Christianity. When that was no longer conceded seat, it went to Constantinople. When Constantinople fell in 1453, it transferred the seat of Christianity or Catholicism, Orthodoxy, whatever you want to call it. Basically, Moscow thinks it took over the third seat, so it has a sense of arrogance in that regard. But yeah, it's unusual. It has a bunch of freaky type Christian traditions. If you read the novels of Dostoevsky, you'll get a feel for this. But again, I've been drawn to it for decades. It's fascinating stuff. I mean, not superstitious, but these are the type of people who go to Siberia, the northern woods of Russia, to get away from civilization. And these people live like the desert monks in the 4th century. You had basically monks who thought that the Russian Orthodox Church was becoming too heterodox, and so they went to get away from it all and to be by themselves. And they were in the northern where all the snow was. So instead of being desert monks, they're like Eskimo monks, kind of. Again, freaky stuff. Russia sent one of theirs to us back in the 20th century, a woman named Catherine de Hewick Doherty. I guess she's a beautiful woman. She was a Russian baroness. She came here after the communists came to power. She established the friendship houses. And we'll do an episode on her some other time. Fascinating woman. But she came to the United States and then Canada and brought with her Russian brand of spirituality. And she was Catholic, by the way, Roman Catholic, very serious Roman Catholic, not Russian Orthodox. But she melded, and this is what I loved about her, she melded this Russian spirituality, which is intense and kind of weird, with Roman Catholic Orthodoxy. And she wrote a bunch of small books that I've really enjoyed. She turned me on to the idea of a Poustinia. Poustinia. Her book is called Poustinia, Christian Spirituality of the East for Western Man. Poustinia is intense. Here's the deal with the Poustinia. You go by yourself. You lock yourself up in a room, and you stay there for 24 hours. Furthermore, you don't have anything with you. And I'm not talking you don't have a TV or an iPhone or an iPad. No. I mean, you have nothing with you. Here's what she says in her book about what you take with you into a Poustinia. She goes, your little room should contain a table, a chair, a Bible, a pencil, some paper, a basin and pitcher for washing up, the bed, but only wooden slats instead of a mattress, a cross without a corpus, maybe an icon of Mary with a vigil light in front of it. I tried that once. Went out to a place north of my town, a little retreat center, kind of. They let me have one of their little cabins. I went there for 24 hours with just those things on me and some food. I knew I couldn't go without eating for 24 hours. And I'm going to tell you, it was one of the most intense things I've ever done. I remember I wasn't going to look at my watch at all. I was just going to sit there and pray, read the Bible, contemplate, whatever it is. And I wasn't going to look at my watch. And I got there like 3 in the afternoon. I broke down and looked at my watch at 4:45. I thought it was like 7. I decided, I'm exaggerating, but I honestly, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 4:45. By the next morning, the retreat center itself, I was like in this little outpost, this little cabin. The retreat center itself was having some like Mennonite convention. The people had told me, they said, hey, if you want to, you can come down and eat with us. And there's this Amish food. And by the following morning, after a pretty intense night, I slept 8 hours, but, again, I prayed and whatever until 10 o'clock. And again, it was incredibly intense. Got up around 6, started back up again with nothing but the Bible. And then 8 o'clock, I knew they were eating. And when they told me I could go eat with them, I distinctly remember this. I said, no, that's okay. I brought my own food. But by 8 o'clock, I was like, I can't stand it. I gotta get some real food, not this dried bread and crap I brought with me. But more so, I think I was really missing people. And I mean, if you had asked me up to that point, I would have told you, oh, I can go by 24, 48, 72 hours without talking to a soul. I don't think I can. Not without, an iPhone and TV and stuff to distract me. Again, it's really hard for me to describe what happened to myself during the Poustinia. So I went and ate for like 45 minutes, and I talked with these people about quilting. That was a topic at the table. They were all quite fascinated by me as a Catholic among all these Mennonites. Like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm just kind of like on a spiritual retreat. And I didn't go into the whole Poustinia thing. And they're just like, they seemed fascinated, but didn't want to ask me too many questions. Kind of like maybe thought I was going to start shooting up the place with a gun or something. But then I went back and I spent like another, from like 8:30 till noon. And I was like, I'm going to get some more food. Now, it was some killer food. It was this Amish-made food, so I can be forgiven, I suppose. But again, it wasn't just the food. I think I was starved for something to do, some sort of human companionship. Then I went back to the cabin from 1 o'clock until 4 o'clock and came home. And even though I kind of quote-unquote broke the Poustinia twice, it was still just a great experience. I've been keeping meaning to get back there. It just never seems... Something always comes up. The retreat center has a conflict, a scheduling conflict. Something always comes up, but I'm going to do it again this coming Lent. I'm determined to. I highly recommend you give it a shot. If you do it though, pick up that book Poustinia by Catherine Doherty and read through it first. It's a pretty thin book. The 16th century's Ivan the Terrible was a pretty bad person. Probably not that bad compared to the 20th century monsters like Stalin or Hitler, but pretty bad. He was like the last ruler of the Duchy of Moscow. Under Ivan, the Duchy of Moscow got quite aggressive and incorporated a lot of its neighbors, forming the Russian Empire, which results in lots of casualties. Ivan the Terrible also carried out a vicious repression of aristocratic families who could resist him, so killing a lot of his own kind, so to speak. Needless to say, he wasn't a man who put up with much. He was given to violent outbursts of temper. At one point, in a fit of rage, killing his own son. And then one day, a guy named Nicholas walked up to him and put a bloody piece of meat in Ivan's hands. And everyone knew it was a reproach for Ivan's bloody ways. And Ivan did nothing. You see, Ivan the Terrible was a very religious person. Maybe schizophrenic, violent and rage-prone on one hand, but then a very devout Russian Orthodox Christian. And Nicholas was a holy fool. Everyone knew he was one of those people with the extreme rare vocation to be a fool for Christ. And it's a fascinating subject. The fool for Christ has arisen at various times throughout history. In the West, we've had a fool for Christ. A guy named Joseph Lebray, 18th century. He forsook everything, lived on the streets of Rome. Even though he's basically a vagabond, everyone knew he was a holy person. When he died, the population of Rome just started chanting, "The saint is dead, the saint is dead." Well, that's the way it was with Nicholas over in 16th century Russia. They knew that he knew he was a holy man. And it's really kind of bizarre. I mean, the fool for Christ renounces everything for Christ. Home, family. He is basically welcome nowhere, but welcomed everywhere at the same time. He does the ultimate sacrifice of all. He actually sacrifices his own reason. And he's kind of like this, kind of like an idiot who, basically has nothing to offer society. But when he speaks, he penetrates to the other side of intense wisdom. And in the Russian spirituality, once people realize you're dealing with the holy fool, not just some bum on the street or some nut job, they got intense respect, if not fear, that you're dealing with basically a prophet of sorts. Needless to say, the fools for Christ are hard to discern from just vagabonds or nut jobs. But if you happen to come across one, you better show them a lot of respect. And in this day and age, it might be something to keep in mind every time you come across a homeless person or a bum on the street. Alright, that's it for this week's episode. Remember, please go to iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review, tell your friends and family, go to the Weekly Demon Facebook page and follow it, or better yet, like it. Also check out the Weekly Demon Twitter feed. Until next week, thanks for listening.